All right, we are live, and I am here with again the legend, the man, the myth. But today we're going to have a twist, right? We want to talk. I mean, not a twist in the sense that we're going to really lean into radical resilience and how being radically resilient to your true north is the idea. It's kind of the pinnacle of reaching our self actualizing. But David has a really fascinating story. He's got both a fascinating story in the business that he's created and the remarkable success that he's had with that, but the challenges that come along with that we really want to get a chance to dive into and highlight. And so, well, David and I normally have discussions that I know I love having. It's a twist. We're going to put him in kind of the hot seat for a moment and really highlight his story and his journey, but then get to lean into what's made a difference or what it's meant to know your true north and to have these radically resilient principles in the midst of trying to grow or growing a successful business. So Mr. David Osk, why don't you tell us? So StatGuard is a business. What's the actual business name is what?
Yeah, so my company is called Chorum Global, CHORUM. It's funny, I got that because of my musical roots. The word chorum means choir, and so my first musical experiences were singing in choirs and so on. So it's a Latin word, but the product that was kind of the genesis for my company is trademarked StatGuardPlus, and it's a keyless, thermostat cover that has a combination lock, and yeah, it's been 10 years of a wild journey from inception to 3,000 retail stores and selling in 5 countries. So it's pretty crazy. That's I don't think there's an entrepreneur out there who, whether it's really a service or a product or something, that takes something like that to market and doesn't experience a whole lot of twists and turns.
Absolutely. The inception story. I mean, I know it, but would love if you'd take for a moment, just like, where did you come up with this idea?
Yeah. So technically the idea was my brother-in-law's. He called me one day and, said, "Hey, where do I get a StatGuard with a combination lock?" And I was actually working in the real estate group at, I won't use their name, but a large telecom chain. And we use StatGuards in our stores, just because everybody and their brother wanted to be messing around with the thermostat, right? It's just,
Right.
just like it is at home. And so I'm like, well, I'll see if I can find one. I didn't think it would be that big of a deal. Well, he had already started looking, couldn't find one. So he called me back, or I called him, I forget. And he's like, I can't find one. And I'm like, yeah, me neither. What a neat idea. And the reason is he was working for banks that own foreclosed properties and getting those things back up for sale. Of course, I was doing facilities management for 100 stores and call centers and so on. And of course, everybody was using StatGuards, but they had a key and nobody could keep up with that tiny key. And I mean, really, it was like an every week event, for our team. I'd get a call. Hey, somebody lost the key for the StatGuard, and we'd have to rip it off the wall, fix the wall, paint the wall, put another one up. So we knew that, it had potential. So anyway, he and I, jumped into business together. And then a few years kind of into that, he went a different direction. I ended up buying him out and just kept going with it. I really wasn't, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure how to run a business, let alone, scale a business and do this. So every bit of this was purely the definition of an entrepreneur, which is figure it out. So, yeah.
And I'm sure that the pathways, as you're I think already alluding to, was just a straight line to success, right? There was, I'm sure, no challenges or setbacks or anything like that. What's the pathway been like? So StatGuard's been around for 10 years now.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, I'll hit some benchmarks, but then I'll kind of go backwards a little bit. So I'll be honest, the first few years were just fooling around. We didn't have any idea what we were doing, and which brought on a lot of imposter syndrome, right? Like we were just like, oh my gosh, who are we to call anybody, let alone a major retail chain, to try to say, hey, we want to do business with you, and we've got a bunch of these in our garage. I mean, we didn't you don't know what you don't know. And of course, the big mistake is build it and they will come, right? But that's not the
Yeah.
case. And so anyway, long story short, I realized, hey, it's not how, it's who. So I needed some help. I needed connections. So I ended up making a connection with a guy that had some products in Home Depot already. And he introduced it to them, and they kind of put us on the map. Like it was, which
Wow.
was, for me as a creative, I've been creating
Yeah.
music and books and all kinds of stuff for my whole life. And I'm a creative at heart, and really a salesman for that matter. But what's kind of fascinating is it was that moment that felt like, we just got to the Super Bowl. Who wouldn't
Yeah.
want to be on the Home Depot shelf?
Home Depot. Yeah.
And it was, and I remember that meeting like it was yesterday. So it's been, man, 7 years ago. And,
Wow.
we're just so grateful for that opportunity. Like, you walk out of a meeting like that and you just feel like your hair's on fire. Like this is, and it's really what, kind of put us over the edge, and being able to just stay in business and reorder product and have a flow of product, and which is a big deal, just cash flow and things like that in running a business. So anyway, since then, I guess a year and a half ago, got onto the Lowe's shelves with a new variation of that. So Home Depot has theirs, Lowe's has a one called the XL. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a really, really uh, long, kind of, it's the word patience is always front and center with all of this, because
Oh, yeah.
it's just a long waiting game. Nobody at that level does anything fast. And so when you tee up a conversation, get ready for a year and a half before you see it on the shelf. And I'll be honest
Yep.
with you, that's agony. But then, in between all of that, there's everything from, patent issues and trademark issues and quality issues and
Yep.
shipping issues and costs rising and COVID. And I mean, I could just go on forever with regards to the number of obstacles, external, and then, by the way, internal, right? Just my own insecurities or my own inabilities, that kind of stuff that are front and center, really still on a daily basis.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the moment you got into Home Depot, then it was a straight line to
Oh,
success.
you're right. Yeah. It's just like zip, and $1 million in the bank. And, but, it's interesting looking back, of course, when you're going through hard times, and we've actually had some here, just in the last, few months, nobody wants to go through those times. And at the same time, when you come out of those and you make it through, right, you're grateful for
Yeah.
that, because it's, and inevitably it's putting more tools in your belt than you would ever have. I mean, in fact, you couldn't have these tools without that stretching and that growing, right? That headwind. And then also, just the fruit of patience and waiting. And that's, of course, something you and I talk about quite a bit with regards to, defining true north, for myself. How am I navigating, these obstacles, as well as creating, more products, right? Like, wow,
Yeah.
once you have a win, okay, I guess I can do this again. So you're thinking about what's next.
Tell me a little bit. So I know that you've hit some big benchmarks, right? There's been different moments that you've, really leveled up and taken some big leaps and had some big successes. COVID, that was definitely a period for a lot of people that was very difficult to navigate, right? I mean, from
Yeah.
everything, the uncertainty to I'm sure shipping issues,
Yeah.
inventory, things like that. How did that impact your business, and how did you get through that?
Yeah. So of course, with me and a million other people, we couldn't get product. So
Crazy.
one of the hard obstacles is if you're sitting on a retail shelf and you can't, deliver product to their store, they're not going to lose any money. They're making money no
Yeah.
matter what. Meaning you get fined if you don't have, a product on the shelf. And I don't blame them, right? That they gave you a chance to put, something, on the real estate of that shelf, right? And it's a big deal. It's a huge honor. So
Yeah.
we had to, air freight product in, and, get really creative on how to, keep the big dogs happy, as it were, right? And again, I want to paint the picture that it's a true honor to be working with companies like that. So for me personally, right, I saw sales dip dramatically. So I actually went and got another job, as it were, bringing in some other income because, hey, I've got a mortgage and, kids heading to college and, the whole 9 yards. And so, it's one of those things where you kind of look at the situation. Sometimes your ego takes a bit of a hit and you swallow hard and you do what's necessary. But again, it goes back to that true north concept, right? I predetermined the things that are valuable to me and what it takes to stay the course and to protect those things. My motto for my StatGuardPlus is protect what's important. And of course, that means a whole lot more than protecting your thermostat. I mean, that's, we chose that because I like talking about important things.
Yeah, and you emerged, I know, through that, right, in COVID. And there was unfortunately a lot of businesses that didn't make it through that time period. But I know not only, were you able to get through, you were able to then, quit that job or however that ended up happening.
Yeah.
And kind of emerged out of that really in a great place. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't just as seamless as that, but kind of hit your stride, right? I mean, from everything with getting into Lowe's to sales on Amazon.
Yeah.
Give a quick highlight of, kind of the successes that you've seen over the past couple of years that have been pretty
really
remarkable.
So coming out of COVID was exciting. Like, we just started seeing some sales tick up. I had actually started a conversation with the team at Lowe's before COVID, and of course when COVID hit, everybody went into survival mode, so that died. But then we picked that conversation back up, of course, when things started to open up a bit. So to be able to do business with them with a different product was just so exciting. In fact, the last year was, the best year I had in business, period. And by far, it was really, really exciting to see that growth and so on. And, this year has been a little bit up and down. And of course, we've had some obstacles with some folks online, trying to copy what we're doing. And I don't want to go into too much of that right now, but it's the, so, there's always obstacles, and it's not a matter of if, but when they're going to come. So, but it's, we're just going to keep fighting and keep going.
It really highlights, right? Remember reading in Harvard Business Review about companies that did resilience training through COVID, right? And it clearly demonstrated that these businesses fared better. Many of them emerged as big winners through COVID.
Yeah.
And yet, right, as the COVID kind of emergency seemed to start to kind of, scale back, a lot of companies stopped investing in resilience. And Harvard Business Review clearly said this is a giant mistake, right? It's always just a matter of time, right? Well, it might not be a pandemic. There's always another crisis looming, another challenge, a setback, right? You start to be really successful, and inevitably you're going to have people that are trying to imitate, right? Sometimes what you're doing, and all the variety of things that anybody that's run a successful business know that happens, right? And so having a really defined resilient strategy that points you to your true north, at least HBR stated that is perhaps the greatest strategic advantage that a business could invest in. What's your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? Do you think there's some truth behind?
Yeah, of course, you're the one who really kind of introduced the resilience concept to me in a way that, was so much more, I guess, deeper. I think everybody would say, well, sure, I want to be resilient. But most people, when they think of that word, they don't realize that it comes when you are a resilient person, and you don't just have a resilient moment, that comes from a pretty deep place. That's a place where, you're it's intrinsic versus extrinsic, right? It's not just, somebody, punch me in the mouth. All right, I'm coming back and swinging. It's not a reflex. It's a way of life. And a more mature person, a more mature leader, a more mature business owner would say, that quite possibly resilience, this might be an overstatement, but I'll say it anyway. It might be the only life strategy. And what's fascinating about that is that, a resilient person, in the truest definition of the word, is someone who's predetermined, right? A lot of the stuff that you teach, they've predetermined what's valuable to them. They've predetermined, where that center of the road is. So when they go in the ditch, whether it's their own doing or someone else's, right? Okay, wait a second. I am knocked down. How long do I want to stay here? And why would I stay there? And what is it in the center of the road that is just fantastic and worth fighting for? In fact, it doesn't even have to be that dramatic. I want to get back in the center of the road so that I just have a sense of peace and dignity about my life. And so I think that, I think anybody who's lived long enough knows full well that the wind blows every single day, sometimes every hour. And, look at, I could pick out the last 90 days and write down, 3 or 4 things that were a real punch in the stomach. Yeah. And in a lot of ways have caused me to spend weeks on end getting up at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep, Andy. Like it's that type of a wind. You're like, whoa. And here's something else I think that's really important to talk with regarding resiliency. Our mutual friend Steve Kinsley brought this up when he was in town here last week. He said that change is way more of an impactful thing than we would give it credence to. And it's not just necessarily something bad that happens, but when life changes, the sense of homeostasis, that's, normal. Normal is not normal right now. And our brains, our bodies, we want normal.
Yeah.
And and again, not to get too deep here, but, we often see people that grew up in a very bad normal repeat the same thing because it's normal.
That's right.
And so I think that, we're wired in a sense of, a consistency that is kind of just under the hood, slightly under our consciousness, that we're always kind of wanting to course correct to. And I think that, having a conscious awareness of what is really valuable, a vocabulary to describe the middle of the road, as you say, true north, right? That's your curriculum, is absolutely crucial. Otherwise, we're not even going to know sometimes when we're in the ditch, and we're going to stay there and waller around for, weeks and months on end and double down on stupid. And so I think the resilience topic, it extends into every single area of our lives. And I think it's one of those things that it's kind of like this, it's that little nudge before everything else. I think resiliency has to be the life strategy, or good luck, right?
Yeah.
Good luck.
I love the way there's so much depth in, the things that you just stated, but, even going back to what you started with resilience, really coming from this kind of intrinsic place, it's really why I use the term radical resilience. It's not because I just want to, make it sound really extreme and, but radical means to be at the fundamental, like, core or essence of something, right?
Yeah.
So to be radically resilient means to be resilient at the identity level, right? It comes out of, right, who you are when you are operating in your most authentic state, right, your truest state. I love you. You sent me a video recently, and I don't even know who the guy's name is, but he was talking about, the law of attraction, which is usually greatly misunderstood, misrepresented, misapplied, to a point, that people stare at a Ferrari all day. Somehow they're going to magically manifest a Ferrari, and that's just silly. But this guy talked about, essentially that we give off, right, kind of these energy vibration or frequencies, and that's true. I mean, that's that does exist. You can feel people's energy, right? You go into a room and you can feel when somebody is just really angry, right? And you're like, just give that person distance. You can feel when somebody's really joyful and happy. But they talked about a study called the Spain study, SPANE, right, where they were able to have 25,000 participants. And they were able to study, right, the energy vibration that they were giving off, and they could tell the difference. Obviously, they had access to between someone that was bored or frustrated or joyful or loving, and they found that there was one emotional state or one state of being right, that was by far the most powerful positive vibration or frequency that we could be in, and it was the state of authenticity,
Yeah.
right?
Isn't that
And I
fascinating?
love then how he defined authenticity, which was when we are saying or expressing things that are true and meaningful, and there's conviction or belief behind it,
Yeah.
right? That
It's
is an incredibly resilient state, and that's it. Really, I think you sent that to me because it's so representative. I think the concept of true north.
yeah, and it's funny. In the past, I'll be honest, I would have thought that was some kind of woohoo kind of stuff, but no,
Yeah,
it's actually you can measure that stuff very, very scientifically. And then we all know, right? You hear somebody say something, oh, that guy just really sucks the oxygen out of the room, or that. I mean,
yeah,
oh my
yep,
gosh, like man, just being around that person makes me nervous, or whatever it is. And it's amazing how that is so true. So one of the things that I love about the stuff that you've taught me, right? This idea of authenticity. And again, in the past, I would be like, oh, that's kind of woohoo kind of stuff. Just I think I would gloss over and be like, just get to work. Go do something. You got too much time on
right,
your hands. Well, what's fascinating is my idea of being authentic and having an identity was about becoming someone. I
yes,
had to achieve things and get the applause of others and get a resume that looked good, to other people. And then I would have an identity, right? As opposed to anchoring to those, deep convictions and values and virtues and strengths and, the desired impact that I want to have in the world around me and experience authenticity, identify those things, identity, and just experience those things, and the fullness of that life, as opposed to looking for that sense of fulfillment in the applause of other people.
yep,
So, if I'm being really honest, I remember landing Home Depot, right? And thinking, well, at least I'm not a failure. I mean, I don't think I would have consciously said that, but truth of the matter is I think that there was something, in my psyche that was like, whew, at least I'm not a complete idiot. Like there's just
yeah,
this sense of, yeah, you just, there's insecurity and you want other people's
yeah,
approval.
yep,
And what's fascinating, of course, is you have a few wins like that, and you realize it really doesn't solve a whole lot. I mean, I'm grateful to have wins, right? I don't want to be losing in life. But
absolutely,
what's fascinating is now that I've understood that radical resilience piece, right? Understanding who God made me authentically, right? Authentically.
yeah,
You always say it gives you a sense of authority, right, to operate in your life.
that's right,
So what's fascinating is one of the modules in your course too, where you have a bit of a different spin on it, but it's writing what would people say about you at your funeral, or what would you want them to say? And for heaven's sakes, if people talk about thermostat guards at my funeral, I will have totally failed. And I yeah, and I think that's just pretty obvious, right? I mean, why? So I would hope that my children would say, stuff like, man, when dad stepped into the room got more joyful and insightful and wiser and safer and stronger. And he made me feel more comfortable about being me, and had such a sense of curiosity about the way he operated with, people in life, and like, a
yeah,
sense of wonder, and even childlike for that matter. Like, God, what are you doing here? Or looking at Parker and Kate and being like, I just think you're the greatest thing in the world right now. What are you thinking about? Like, let's dive in. Whatever you're into, I'm into. I sure hope that those are the things that they say about me. And again, I'm not perfect by any stretch. They're gonna point out some things that I wish my dad would have done this a little bit better. But I hope the defining characteristics of me are that.
I can tell you, my friend, because I've seen you with your family and had the great privilege. And I think the way you just described how you want to be perceived is certainly been very much my experience of who you are and how I've seen you with your family, right? And it really does speak to, like, even for a moment reflecting on, being radically resilient, and how being in that authentic state, right, it creates, I mean, it's very similar, I think, what he's defining to be in flow state, right? When
Yeah.
you're pursuing things, and it's not so much about the goal, it's not so much about achieving, right? I mean, again, like you said, achievement feels great, and I
Yeah.
certainly want to win too. But Maheli Sheikh Semihai, the guy who actually coined the term flow state, right? He initially started pursuing that research because he was looking to pursue happiness, like what puts people in their highest level of happiness.
Yeah.
And he thought initially it was, achievement, and then the byproduct, right? The fruits of that, whether that was, getting to enjoy leisure or whatever those things were. But he found that it's the pursuit of really meaningful goals in who we are becoming as we are stretching ourselves in the process
I love
of,
that.
learning and growing.
Mm.
That's where we experience our greatest happiness. And so when we learn how to pursue those things, right? Like, a lot of people use positive affirmations, and I'm a fan of those too, but they don't know how to do them in ways that actually create, the intended effect. So they'll say things that they want to be true, right? Kind of the law of attraction. I'm a millionaire. And then they go to the bank account, right? And it's like over, drawn. And then it creates cognitive dissonance because they know they're lying. So it actually is counterproductive. But the idea of this authenticity and radical resilience is you are stating things that are legitimately true and there's no internal conflict, right? You're simply affirming values, you're affirming purpose in your life. And the more that you are focused on that and the more that you are affirming these things, you get stronger and stronger, right? It creates that virtuous loop where now you feel. And so if you're in the midst of,
Love that.
a difficult season in business, and you, right, and we've all experienced that where something, really we have a setback, a rejection, a failure, but it's not so much about the external thing that happens, it's what happens to us internally with that and how do we respond.
Yeah.
Right. And if we then create a vicious cycle because I'm really upset and hurt or feeling like an imposter, and so now I go and take 3 really destructive steps, and then I get rigid and decide, why don't I double and triple down on this? Right. That's how a business can suddenly start to really head in a negative direction. And if you have a team and they see that the leader, right, is clearly heading, is not resilient, right, is now taking it out on his employees, it creates this ripple effect that can undermine the resilience and the success of everyone there. On the
Yeah.
other hand, right, when someone's able to point back true north, they're able to affirm things that are true, right? They're able to utilize some of the just resilience, the benefit finding, meaning making exercises and the various things that you're able to rebound pretty quickly, right? Wait, yeah, this sucked, but I still have control how I respond to this, right? And I can still choose to affirm the attitude, right? Viktor Frankl style. And now the people around me can see like, hey, we just experienced a really tough time in business. How is David, right? How is Andy going to handle this? And when they see like, wow, he still has a great attitude and he seems to be, taking this with how are we going to learn from this and how are we going to get better and how can I empower all you? Everyone around you, right, feeds off that authenticity. All of a sudden, right, they can feel that energy given off and everybody starts to rise up. So it's so powerful.
I mean, I love that. I want to say something back to with regards to an affirmation. It's funny when you say something that's not true to yourself. Well, you wouldn't say that to anybody else either. If I looked at my 18-year-old son in college and say, Parker, you're a millionaire. Oh no, he's broke. And it would be just laughable to say something that's just not even remotely true, as opposed to what would really build him up and give him courage would be like, hey, I see that you're doing hard things and I hope you get to enjoy those things. Even for myself, I remember for a while that I would say out loud, I love obstacles. Truth of the matter is I don't. I really don't.
Yeah.
And in the past, I would never admit that, but I don't like doing hard things. But guess what? As a more mature person, now I say something, like, David, you're fully resourced. I'm just,
That's
like you said, I'm just the man for the job. Of course I can handle this, but I don't say something that's not true, and yeah, when there's that big punch in the stomach, I'm not going to lie and say, man, I'm glad this happened. No, but I'm going to look at it as a man, as David Osk, and say, I'm just the man for the job. I have every resource that I need to punch through this and take care of business. And if I don't, right, my number one, core value, being faith in God, well, I know somebody who does, and he knows the outcome. And even if it's not what I want, it's better. So even still, right, that I can say what's true without tying some nice little pretty bow on it.
Yeah.
And of course, I love doing that for other people. When I see them going through a hard time, I like to breathe life into people, inspire them. And I want to say stuff like, hey, I see these gaps, right? I see what's going on here. I see you, right? You're not perfect. But let me tell you what I see underneath all of that. I see a person who keeps showing up day after day, who pours life into other people and says things that are good and courageous and kind. Yeah, you don't have all the answers. You don't need to, right? Let's keep walking forward together. You're not alone. And I've said that to so many people. Part of it is because I need to hear it. And even to my own kids, right? They're both in college this year. Parker's in college. Kate's doing dual enrollment, as a junior, but she's taking college courses, in Gallatin, and it's challenging stuff. We've had some tears and all kinds of stuff. And I just say, hey, I see your hard work. I got your back. You can't lose. Let's go.
So good.
So
you are, just going to give you props for a moment. But your ability to speak truth to people, both in speaking hard truths, things that people need to hear, right? Holding people accountable, but then being able to follow that up, right, with truth, speaking into their character and who they are is really remarkable. And it's a phenomenal skill set. It's not an easy thing to do, right?
No.
Some people err on the side with that of just coming down way too hard. Some people are overly, right? Like, let's not say anything negative. And so to be able to speak truth on both ends of that is a gift.
Well, I appreciate it. And I don't get it right every time, as you know.
straight line to success, right?
Yeah.
I love that idea, right? I mean, just of kind of the holistic nature of what you're saying, right? Of how this concept of being in your true north state, being radically resilient, the skills that we teach. One of the really cool things that we get to do is we go in and we do a training and we do these workshops and we get to see a business improve. We get to see revenue go up. We get to see productivity. We see less sick days, right? We see less unproductive time. Burnout goes way down. But one of the coolest things that I get to hear is then the reports of how these individuals take the same skill sets that we taught them in the workplace, and they start to recognize, like, oh, it's the same thing I can do at home. And I'm getting in less arguments with my wife. I'm handling difficult moments with my kids better. I'm making better choices with my health. And to really start to see it, I probably said this, I don't know how many times on various podcasts and live streams. My favorite personal development quote comes from the man, Viktor Frankl. Between what happens to us and our response, there's a space. And in that space is where our capacity for growth and freedom exists. But that ability to recognize in the moment, right, kind of having that awareness and the mindfulness to say, oh, here's where I usually respond to a setback or frustration, right? My kids talking back to me, whatever it is, right? And I just allow the emotion of the moment, what was modeled to me, in my upbringing or whatever it is, right, to habitually take over. You start to catch it and you start to recognize, well, there's actually a pivot and a completely new trajectory that I can create. But as you've pointed out, if you haven't predetermined what that is, that space will come and you'll just naturally, if you don't know where to pivot to, it's very difficult to figure it out in that moment. And so what you often do is you just then revert to the habitual thing. We've actually created an acronym, right? One of the things, because we keep hearing, I'm getting better and better at recognizing that space. But can you give us a tool to help us better utilize that so that we're heading true north? So we created this acronym that's just been amazing. I'll admit I applied it like 3 times already this week in my own life, to help people really maximize. So, because it's amazing when you start to recognize, like, oh, wait, I've got choice and I can actually kind of conquer, my emotions. I can't control my emotions, but I can actually let them subside, and then I can engage my prefrontal cortex. I can access my values. And now I can start to make really great decisions in the midst of a really difficult, high turmoil time.
Yeah,
that's a phenomenal feeling, right? When you start to recognize that you can actually choose an entirely new path, and that path is going to lead to massive breakthroughs. So.
And on a basic level too, like if someone were to tell you, hey, you have what it takes, I'd be, what if you have no idea what that is? You mean it's just this generic sense of try harder? Yeah. Well, I guess I just need to bear down and grit my teeth and just try harder. Is that really the answer to, busting through something? Absolutely not. And for everybody, that vocabulary is unique to your soul. And when you start to identify, right, the hierarchy of things that, we've talked about with values, convictions, virtues, your eulogy, all that kind of stuff, it's amazing what becomes clearer as to that power, that horsepower that's going to get you to, persevere. It's different based on, your soul's, fingerprint, as it were. And unless you've identified that stuff, you're going to be, working, not to dog our grandparents, but, working like our grandparents. Just, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to get cut. I'm going to wrap a little duct tape on it and keep going. And I'm going to work for the same guy who's given me the same business, right? Same line of nonsense for the next 30 years, because I'm just going to be loyal to, to whatever it is. And I really believe it's because, there's some cultural aspects to that, but I also believe quite often it's because your sense of awareness of your world, yourself and world around you is sorely lacking. So you double down on things that are actually robbing you of life, as opposed to pulling the tools out of your belt, sharpening those tools and cutting into life and sawing it up and, turning it into something else.
Can I get an amen? I relate to the doubling down and all of that. And we know as we wrap things up, right? The research on resilience shows that, resilient individuals, especially when you infuse, like that's what we really point out. We're not just talking about white knuckle resilience or this general sense of just, persevere and don't quit and, kind of dust it off. It's like, no, this is highly personalized, customized, resilient strategies that reflect who you uniquely are. And so that way it becomes much more practical, efficacious, and we know that with resilience, you're more likely to be successful, to have better relationships, to have better health. In the workplace, you have less illnesses, less missed time. It's that thing when you don't quit, and then you keep being able to know how to respond to adversity by getting better, stronger, wiser. Success really becomes inevitable at that point, right? And you have an entire team operating at that. Or an entire family, right? It's really phenomenal what you can start to see, the traction you can start to get. So as we clean up here, wrap up, what would you say? So anybody that might be listening to this, as far as the either the benefits or what you might miss out on, or who might be a good ideal person to reach out and see if this might be a good fit for them. What are some?
So I'll start with for myself personally. I think that if I hadn't gone through, your True North blueprint and identified those things that were really unique to me, like used my language to describe my own essence, my own soul, my own likes and dislikes, strengths, things that aren't strengths, right? Virtues, impact, all that kind of stuff. If I hadn't gotten real clarity around that, I don't think I would be as good of a husband or father, for one thing, let alone, a leader in other capacities. And then also, I wouldn't be able to, look at those around me. Those that I love, friends, even strangers for that matter, in a light that would be, filled with curiosity and wonder and empowerment. I think there would be this more of this idea of hunker down, be threatened, be rigid about all my thinking and, all the shoulds. And I feel like my whole life has just expanded now with, okay, what color are you? What's going on over here, man? Let's figure that out and get behind it. So you can straighten up your spine, lift your head and run, as opposed to that big question mark over your head and heart, in your heart. It's like, so I think that, so who's a candidate for this? Well, really everybody, but I would say that, first and foremost, if you're a leader of any type, if you consider yourself, you're leading someone else, let alone yourself, right? Yeah. But good night. Your whole life will start to shift when you assign meaning to, the greatest good, right? The summum bonum in your life. And that's my podcast name, right? It's right. When you assign meaning to those things in you that are like the fingerprint, right, of your soul, well, life starts to get really, really good. And you start to have resources that are, that on some level feel inexhaustible. It's not that we don't get tired, knocked down. It's not that we don't need friends to pick us up, that kind of stuff too. But when you have a nebulous and vague understanding of who you are and what your purpose is and all the, how do I handle these types of things, you're operating at about 25%. And it's just that bear down and grit thing, as opposed to, man, I'm gonna go through, around, up and over, and I'm taking as many people with me. And when we get to the other side, we're going to make as many friends as we can and lift them up. And just this wonderful sense of community, as opposed to a real insecure and fear-based life.
Sign me up. I'm in. Hey, where can people real quick, where can they find StatGuard? You mentioned your podcast. Go ahead and give that a plug.
Yeah. So we just launched another unit as well. So if you go to lockboxpro.com or statguardplus.com or davidosk.com, you can check out those sites. Or of course, email me directly at hello@davidosk.com, and that's davidask.com.
Awesome. And the podcast?
Oh yeah, the podcast is with my wonderful sister Kirsten, and it's called
You guys are amazing.
Yeah, thank you. It's called The Greatest Good Podcast.
You can find it, I'm sure, Apple Podcast, Google, all the
Spotify,
platforms.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So grateful to have this time and appreciate. And obviously, we have gotten a chance to do a lot of lives, but to be able to just highlight some of your entrepreneurial journey, and even, obviously, we experience things holistically. So the holistic effect of that, super valuable. I'm always inspired by you, and appreciate this time here.
Thanks.
All right, take care.